Okay. You mind if I record?
Yeah, go ahead. Now I'm recording this. This is your second lecture in MCOM summer session. This is over quiz number 2. This lecture is going to be a review of all the things that we've gone over thus far in the class and how they apply to quiz number 2 and going over all the stuff that's on quiz number 2. Let's start with what we went over in quiz number 1. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but remember, we're using the book. Here it is right here, Mass Media Research. Mass Media Research, a green book that all of you should have access to. Now, in that book, in chapter 1, it talks about the different kinds of research there are and how people study in mass communication discipline. And I'm going to go over a couple things that we went over before. First off, try to make it hopefully easier for everybody to understand, mass communication research usually has 2 different focuses. One of the focuses is the people who are paying attention to and are more interested in the people, audience research. Sometimes you study the people, and then there are other people in mass media and mass communication that study the content itself, the things that people will post or people might access. So those are the 2 different ways that you might go about it. You're either studying the people or you're studying the content. Now, the way we do this is we take a scientific approach to it. Since we're taking a scientific approach, the things we went over in quiz 1 were the 5 goals of science. 5 goals of science are PCUD: to predict, explain, control, understand, and describe. In mass communication, mass communicators are usually more inclined to be those that are their goals are usually to predict and control, especially controlling the audiences and predicting how the audience is going to use content. Okay, predicting and controlling for mass communication. And interpersonal communication, they're the ones that are going after explaining and describing. So we got the explain and describe for interpersonal, and everybody tries to understand the world that's doing research.
Yeah, I got that switched up.
Yeah, you got those switched up. Yes, you did. But anyway, that's the one bit of review there is the goals of science. So we go in with these goals of science. Those are our objectives, so to speak. And Thomas Kuhn tells us that science and how people approach science, it got pre-science, normal science, and revolutionary science. Normal science, which is what most people are in the phase of usually, is science that's guided by people that are adapting a certain way of thinking that they call that a paradigm. They're of a paradigmatic belief. You have people that are of a paradigmatic belief, and those are the people that you were kind of that you like most if you're a researcher. Those are your people that you're inclined that if you want to team up and do research or you follow them and everything else, they would be the people that have the same way of thinking that you have. That paradigmatic belief usually dictates what theories you believe and which ones you don't. And you usually conduct your research to test the theory and to go ahead, and you're usually following up on other people's research. When you're following up on other people's research, that's called normal science. If you were trying to do something completely different than you'd be rogue science. You would be completely different off on your own. And when revolutionary science happens, when it gets to the point where so many people believe that what the belief and the theory that they had has gotten to a point where either it's universally accepted or we got to ditch it and try something different. That's the revolution aspect of it. And when it gets to the point where it's universally accepted or something, I guess sometimes they call that a paradigm shift. sometimes a paradigm shift occurs. And as I mentioned in the previous lecture, the paradigm shift, one example of that in astronomy happened in 2012 when they decided that Pluto wasn't a planet. It was many, many years before that everybody's saying, oh, Pluto's a planet, we got 9 planets. And that's what everybody's going with. And then now they're trying to tell us that Pluto, oh, its orbit is a little bit different. It was so far out there, we got it a little bit wrong. It's just an put it in the asteroid or meteor classification. It's less than a planet. So that's an example of paradigm shift. Now, quiz 2, where we are now. Quiz 2, we're gonna look at paradigms in more detail. We're gonna look at the science and scientific method in more detail, and we're gonna proceed from there. First, let's go, and I'm gonna share the screen here, and one participant can share at a time, and we'll see how this goes when it comes to recording. Desktop, yes. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, my screen up there. I'll put you guys over here. My screen up there is, and this is the textbook. Textbook on page 10, it has the characteristics of the scientific method. There are 6 of them. It says right here, the scientific method approach of learning is a series of small steps. It has several defining characteristics, or 6. 1, scientific research is public. It advances in science and makes information available for others. So we can have normal science, where other people will read it and follow it or not. Number 2, science is objective. Objective versus subjective. When something is objective, you're taking a very logical approach to it, and you're trying to keep your opinion out. And let's go to the next page, 11. Studies conducted, you follow rules when you're objective. Number 3, science is empirical. So researchers are concerned with a world where knowledge is potentially measurable. And from experience and measurable, something that's measurable that's tangible. It's measurable. So science is empirical, like experiments. Or that would be an example of something you put your hands on, right? Everybody knows chemistry and experiments. Now, there's where operational definitions and constitutive definitions come in from the first quiz. Now, let's go to page 12. Number 4, science is systematic and cumulative. So it's a system. And the knowledge builds on each other. It's cumulative. So no one research study stands alone, nor does it rise or fall on itself. The student has to always use previous studies as building blocks for their own work. This is why we talk about the importance of doing literature reviews whenever you're doing your studies. A literature review is the proof in the pudding that you've read other people's research, that you're not rogue, and it gives the people the direction in the previous studies that you're following. So it in a way that kind of validates yourself when you're doing that, because somebody that has something that's published, that means it's been peer reviewed and other people have accepted it. Okay, so that's 4. 5, science is predictive. One of the goals of science, right? Science is concerned with relating the present to the future. In other words, that would mean it has a purpose. In fact, scientists strive to develop theories because, amongst other reasons, they are useful in predicting behavior. Oh boy, if we can predict people's behavior, that's priceless, to be able to predict the behavior of people. Theories, adequacy, and its abilities. Anyway, that's 5. Number 6, science is self-correcting. As mentioned earlier, scientific method approach is learning the small steps, they're baby steps, it's building on each other, systematic and cumulative, and it's self-correcting. If they realize that they got something a little bit wrong and something needs to be adjusted, they'll make adjustments. Now some of the minor adjustments wouldn't be considered a paradigm shift, but when you got a major adjustment like they did in 2012, then that's complete. That's more than self-corrective. That's like let's start with change the rules a little bit, change the way of thinking a little. That's what they did when they were doing that paradigm shift, and they changed the way of thinking because they kind of emphasized and specifically detailed what defines a planet to distinguish that Pluto was an asteroid or meteor because of its orbit and stuff and size. That's why it's a paradigm shift. Okay, that takes care of your 6 characteristics of the scientific method. Those are on pages 10 to 12. Now let's go to the research procedures, the step-by-step, the systematic. That's on page 13. And on page 13 here, there's 8 steps. First step, you select a problem. Second step, you review existing research and theory. That's a literature review. Third step, you develop hypotheses or research questions. This is where you're making the predictions. When you, a hypothesis is an educated guess, a prediction, and then you do the research to figure out whether you were right or not. And you don't say that I was right or I was wrong in your research study. When you do the research study in the language, you either affirm the hypothesis or you reject or deny the hypothesis. Now, number 4, you determine an appropriate methodology and design. And number 5, you collect relevant data. Number 6, you analyze and interpret the results. Number 7, you present the results in appropriate form. And number 8, this is only when necessary, you replicate the study. So those are the 8 steps in the scientific method. Those are on quiz 2, as are the 6 characteristics. That is 14 of the questions on quiz 2. 8 for the steps here in the research process, the research procedures, and 6 for the characteristics of science. Now, it goes right down here, and we got the step 4 includes whether it's qualitative or quantitative. And so appropriate methodology, research design, quantitative methodology versus qualitative. We're going to go into that more in the next quiz, the quantitative versus qualitative. So I'm not going to try to explain that in detail here. Now let's get to why. Now I kind of told you and hinted to why we were doing the 5 goals of science. That's so we can embrace the scientific method and understand the scientific procedures or the research process. Now, Thomas Kuhn, why did we bother with Thomas Kuhn and the paradigm? For the paradigm is why. Normal science and paradigms, now we got to go to page 117. So I'm going to go ahead and go right here. And I'm going to type in 117, return, and cross my fingers here. I hope that this works. Incidentally, come on. Yeah, it's there. This is the beginning of chapter 5. And chapter 5 talks about the aims and philosophy. And right after they talk about the aims of philosophy, they talk about qualitative. And then right here, where they talk about a paradigm at the bottom. Each of these represents a model or a paradigm for research, an accepted set of theories. This is the definition. Accepted set of theories, procedures, and assumptions about how researchers look at the world. That is an answer to a quiz question on chapter 2, on quiz 2. It's in chapter 5. Now, the paradigms are based on axioms Paradigm's important. The positive paradigm, remember, when I'm talking about the paradigm, a paradigm is a philosophy. It's a way of thinking. It's your mentality. The positive paradigm is the oldest and still the most widely used in mass media research. The positive paradigm, basically the positive paradigm is basically works under the supposition. It supposes that we can make sense of the world. That's the positive aspect of it. We can figure things out. It involves quantification, hypotheses, and measures. Positive paradigm, we can measure stuff. Everything can, there is such a thing as a cause and effect relationship. And if we can figure out the cause, then we'll get the effect. That's positivist. Okay, now a second paradigm here is interpretive paradigm. The interpretive paradigm is to understand how people in everyday natural setting create meaning and interpret the events of the world. This paradigm became popular in the 70s and 80s and gained visibility in the 90s, and this is a newer paradigm. The interpretive paradigm is more of a qualitative approach. Okay, very qualitative oriented. Now, the critical paradigm is a third paradigm. It draws on analysis, critical analysis, and it's used in the humanities. Critical researchers are interested in such concepts as power, society, and when you're critical of something, you try to tear it apart and be very critical of it. Okay, so a critical paradigm, you got the positive, you got the interpretive, you got the critical. Those are the three main ones. The fourth one that your book authors don't talk about here is what we call the postmodernist paradigm. The postmodernist paradigm is the anti-positivist. Remember what I said, what makes everything about the positive so special is the positive was under the belief that, hey, we can make sense of the world. The anti-positivist, the postmodernist says, no, we can't necessarily make sense of the world. No. We don't believe that people are necessarily creatures of habit and they're always going to repeat their behavior. Things just happen on their own. Sometimes, some things are just coincidences. But I don't believe that I can be able to predict and control. That would be the postmodernist. And the postmodernist approach, the number 4 paradigm there, there are more people who believe in doing research like what we call biographies of things and deep introspection, ethnography. That's what we call that. And ethnography is one of the main ways that they go about doing research is through ethnography. And they get themselves entrenched into the research a little bit when they do that. So not everybody buys into that 4th paradigm. And that's probably why the book authors didn't put it in here, incidentally. Okay, so that's on page 19, there's in that inset, there's an inset here on page 19. There it is. Different methodologies are associated with different paradigms. Quantitative methodology generally adopts a positive paradigm, whereas a qualitative promotes a critical paradigm. Those who accept the critical paradigm generally follow the methodology of the humanities. And we're talking about critical in the humanities. We're usually talking more about English. History can be in there as well, and languages, foreign languages. So in contrast, interpretive paradigm rely on methods, focus groups, ethnography, and observation. And like I said, ethnography kind of went off on itself, and more people say, well, ethnography is really bad because people are a part of it. So some people say we can't call that interpretive because they can't be, they're not being very objective. So we're just going to call them the postmodernists. That's what made for the 4th. not everybody believes that there's a fourth. Okay, so those are your paradigms right there, and that's from chapter 5. Now let's get away from this and see if we can. Oh, that's right. I have to go down here. I have to go to this. And let's see if I can get this. Oh, that's right. Stop the share. What am I saying? It's right up there. Okay. So that is 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3, the 3 main areas that are in quiz number 2. I'm gonna triple check to make sure Micah. Yeah, I don't see anything from Micah. Micah's not in here. So let's go over here, and I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the screen share again. Share the screen. And there are the people in the class, and I'm in the middle there. I'm gonna put me off the side. Now, Unit 2 quiz. As you can see, the Unit 2 quiz has a scientific method, six characteristics. The research process, step 1, 2, 3, they must be in order. The paradigm definition, first paradigm, second paradigm, third paradigm, the fourth paradigm, postmodern. Mass communication defined, interpersonal communication defined, and research methodology 1 and 2. This research methodology 1 and 2 here, that goes to quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative versus qualitative. And as I stressed to you, mass communication in the positive paradigm, it says it in your book, on page 117. The positive paradigm of most mass communicators are positivists, and because they're positivists, they try to do stuff that's measurable and quantitative. Whereas the humanities and the people in humanities and interpretive scholars, they're qualitative. They use qualitative research, and critical falls under qualitative too. Okay, which paradigm is MCOM? I kind of just told you that. It's positivist. Interpersonal, it's either critical or interpretive. I'll accept either one for that. Okay, but I think your book says critical. Okay, so that is a quiz in a nutshell. Now, how are both of you feeling with what I just told all of you?
I'm pretty confident about it. I just need
Yeah,
to read the chapter again.
I already took the chapter, the second quiz, and the only thing I think I messed up on was the quantitative versus qualitative part. But everything else I think was fine.
Okay, I'm glad to hear from both of you that it's pretty straightforward and that you didn't have any problems. I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording on this, and I'm gonna go ahead and try to post this on the web, and we'll see how that works. I'm gonna go ahead and share it. And I'm gonna end the meeting, and